Chapter 1. Have the guts to tell the truth. People lie because they think it'll get them ahead. People lie because they think it'll help them avoid hardship. People lie because they want to protect their image. People lie because they're scared. People lie because they are terrified of the truth. You see, the truth comes with responsibility and accountability. This fear may never be overcome in many because it is never identified. People will live their entire lives proclaiming that they are not afraid of anything, but simultaneously be terrified of the truth. In this chapter, I hope to inspire you to have the guts to tell the truth. "You are so hard-headed," my father would say in frustration. "You must have to jump off the bridge to know there's water under it." And I was. I've been a curious person as long as I can remember, and this was problematic for me growing up. My military-minded father believed that people had one responsibility: to follow the laws of their authority. He was uninterested in exploring my explorative mind and analytical nature, and I constantly swerved outside of the laws and was routinely reprimanded for it. "Why can't you just do what you were told?" he would ask, defeated in getting me to conform to laws imposed on me. This caused serious internal conflict for me as a child. I didn't know why I was so curiously rebellious. All I knew is that when something caught my attention, it deserved an investigation. How else would I figure out what it was and how it worked? Getting caught doing things my father specifically told me not to do over and over again was not fun. In fact, the fear I felt of punishment would cause me to lie and say that I had not touched things when I obviously did. I would lie so passionately that I would begin to believe the lie myself. And of course, lying became the second offense and made the punishment even worse. The icing on the cake to believing my own lies was believing that I was being treated unfairly. As an adult, I can see how this was mentally a slippery slope. Feeling victimized and blaming law enforcement rather than realizing my own mind was behind the scenes pulling all the strings could not lead to anything positive. These experiences became so intense that I began contemplating suicide at a very young age. Here I was getting punished for things I truly did not believe I did, and even if I did own up to doing it, I did not have a clue why I did it. I felt powerless to change the behavior. I felt like I was destined to continue the same loop of actions and punishments for as long as I could imagine. I remember thinking that running into traffic would be a good way to go because that way maybe God would see it as an accident and let me go to heaven. I went to Catholic school and we were taught that if you commit suicide, you could not get into heaven because you never get the opportunity to ask for forgiveness for that sin. But this 7-year-old black kid was smarter than God, though. I remember writing a letter to my father with tears in my eyes about how I've been feeling and what I have been thinking about. I was ill-equipped to make sense of it on my own. It was a very tough thing for me to do as a child, but now looking back, I see how mature I was to seek help with my mental health. I do not think he took it lightly, but all I can remember is him suggesting that he hide the knives, to which I responded with a shrug. We never spoke of it again. Thoughts would arise here and there, but for some reason I cannot explain, it was the thought of my grandmother, Granny Ma, who would talk me down off the ledge. The thought of breaking her heart at the news of my death was enough to get me to dismiss suicide as an option. She is watching me write this book from heaven now, and I know she is very proud. The mischievousness and lying continued until I made a shift. I learned it was low-key entertaining to light fires and watch things burn. Do you remember when you discovered fire? I would light paper, dried leaves, sticks, or whatever I could find on fire for fun when I was bored. On this day, I was lighting tissue paper on fire and watched it burn in a glass jar in my room. Before getting caught, I had long thrown away the ashes and rinsed the jar, so I thought, we good. But there was one thing I forgot. When my father confronted me about the smell, naturally, I played dumb. What smell? He knew I had been lighting something on fire, but without proof, I thought I would win the battle. I always thought this way, innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That is when he turned to my sister, Nia. Nia and I shared a room with a makeshift wall and a door my father put up because we were coming of age and needed our own space. The wall gave us visual privacy, but did not quite reach the ceiling, so sound and smell were still a shared experience in our rooms. After scolding me, he starts to yell at Nia for not snitching. She began to cry and feel bad for basically minding her own business. The combination of her tears and her innocence caused me to feel overcome with guilt. She had nothing to do with it. I stood up for her. It was me. I was the only one lighting paper. Leave her alone, I exclaimed. Almost immediately, he seemed to fade away as he disappeared into his room. I could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old, and although he was still angry and concerned when I spoke to him years later, he told me he left because he was proud. He was proud that I stood up for my sister and proud that I could finally tell the truth. What I learned was not to follow the rules. Thank God. What I learned is to take responsibility for my actions. This meant I was allowed to be who I was, as long as I was not lying about it. It did not mean, however, to do whatever I wanted. Instead, I learned to avoid doing things I feel I would need to lie about or just take the consequences. From here on out, I was able to process the opportunity I had to be myself and live my truth as long as I was responsible for any damage that it may cause. I could now gauge whether pursuing something was worth it or not based on where I would be if it was effective versus if it blew up in my face. What I found is most of the time, whether things went according to plan or not, I always survived, recouped any loss, and had a new story to tell. No matter what, I gained a memory in which I could use to see the good or the bad. I think this is valuable to you as the reader because I find that most people would rather avoid the consequence than going for the gold. Not risking anything is the biggest risk of all. Why playing it safe is the biggest risk of all. You'll be complacent. You'll settle for less than you deserve. You'll begin to feel stuck. You cannot get to great if you're afraid to lose good. People who have not learned to take responsibility for what goes wrong in their lives have a hard time doing things to improve. As I see it, they feel they already have so much dysfunction in their lives that they're not responsible for. They think, why in the world would I do something that might make it even more complicated? And that's understandable. That is why their goal is to just be fine. If I'm fine, I may not be living to my highest potential, but I can try to be content with what I have. Sure, what I have is not the best or guaranteed to stay around, but if I do not do anything to lose what I have, at least it won't be my fault if I lose it. I can lose my home, belongings, or job security at any moment, but I won't think about that now because if it happens, someone else should clean the mess. I didn't make it. All people seem to care about is who is at fault. It's about time that we disassociate responsibility from fault. You see, there are plenty of things that are not your fault, but are your responsibility. At a young age, I was able to start taking responsibility for things I did not believe were my fault and gain the power to influence situations to my benefit. Yes, I was naive in thinking that the smoke smell that got my sister yelled at was not my fault, but I still like to submit to you that if you took responsibility more often, you too would uncover a role that you played in the outcome you were experiencing. For instance, where you were born was not your fault. Where you currently live is your responsibility. How you were raised is not your fault, but how you manage yourself is your responsibility. Your job not being as fulfilling as it once was is not your fault, but whether you stay or not is your responsibility. So much of our life is out of our control, but just as much of it can be under our influence if we choose to take responsibility for it. All of it. When you take responsibility, you become more equipped to take bigger risks because you know that you are the reason you are where you are and the only person who can take you where you want to go. It's not by chance, it's by choice. The choice to stay safe will also keep you stagnant, but the choice to take responsibility for the good, the bad, and the ugly in your life will allow you to influence parts of your life you would never have thought you had power over. The next time you want to blame your spouse, your friends, your family, or even your government for how you feel or your level of success, I want you to remember taking responsibility for these things and taking fault are two different things. Let's take fault out of the equation. I want you to think of responsibility as nothing more than your ability to respond. Confidence comes from execution. We all want to be confident and we all want to use that confidence to execute. The problem is we think we'll get the confidence before we commit to executing the actions that it takes to generate confidence. Confidence is what happens after you've tried the thing and got to see what's on the other side of it. Whether you win or lose, you survive and have the opportunity to try again. In a worst case scenario, you'll take what you've learned from your last attempt and apply it to future ones. Having done the thing and surviving it does something amazing to your confidence, as you know that you can do it better than before. If more of us realize that the worst thing we can do is wait to be perfect before we practice, the world would benefit so much more from beginners that actually have something to offer. By procrastinating practice for perfection, you also put off progress. Embracing your strengths and weaknesses in the name of progress towards your highest ideals is what it means to have the guts to tell the truth.